This is Cassino War Cemetery in Italy, one of the most evocative locations anywhere on the Second World War battlefields of Europe. Cassino saw some of the fiercest fighting of the Second World War in Western Europe. We often think of the Second and the First World Wars as very different, but those who fought here described it as like one of those great battles of the Great War, those fights of attrition in the trenches with huge shelling and destruction everywhere. One journalist called Cassino the Ypres of the Second World War. Between January and May 1944, a whole series of battles were fought here. And the reason it was so important is because the road at Cassino led straight to Rome. By May 1944, around 500,000 Allied servicemen were involved in the fight to break through the German defences, which had been set up across Italy. And the linchpin of those defences was Monte Cassino, a formidable barrier to the Allies. Tens of thousands of men were killed and wounded, fighting on the slopes, fighting up towards the famous Benedictine Abbey, which was destroyed by Allied bombing in February 1944. The Cassino has a special significance for New Zealand. New Zealand forces had fought in the campaign in the Mediterranean in the earlier part of the war, particularly in Greece and in Crete. But in 1944 they came to Cassino with a score to settle against the Germans. And they suffered heavy casualties and some of the fiercest fighting for control of Monte Cassino and for the town of Cassino itself. And perhaps no one suffered more than the 28th Battalion, the Maori Battalion, who were fighting near the train station in the town of Cassino. They suffered something like 60% casualties fighting for that significant landmark. This is the grave of Cyril Bewley, who was a war correspondent, a journalist with Kemsley newspapers, who was here at Cassino embedded with the Allied forces to try to describe to his readers what was happening here and why it was so significant. And he died on the 18th of May 1944, the day that Monte Cassino behind me was finally captured by Allied forces. Along with one of his colleagues, an Australian journalist called Roderick MacDonald, he was travelling through to go to the ruins of Monte Cassino when his truck hit a mine that had been laid by the Allied forces. And both were killed. It's a particularly poignant reminder of the dangers that still lurked around Cassino, even when the fighting was over. It's also a reminder of the very modern nature of the warfare here. Two journalists embedded with Allied forces describing the action. Now, the architect of this cemetery was Louis de Soissons. He was the principal architect for all of the commissioned cemeteries around the Mediterranean. And he was most famous before the Second World War for designing Welwyn Garden City. Now, his design attempted to marry a modern form of remembrance with an ancient form of aesthetic, of classical design features like the reflective pool, which is the centerpiece for the whole of the cemetery and the memorial. When you look into the pool, you see reflections not just of the Cross of Sacrifice, but also of Monte Cassino looming large over the cemetery. But the memorial too is the focal point for the cemetery. It was unveiled in 1956, and on it are the names of about 4,000 servicemen who lost their lives in Sicily and in Italy, but who have no known grave. And the memorial too evokes that classical Latin architecture with classical Roman design features, the scroll work, the style, and even the way that they're made with the marble and the bronze and the names picked out in golden lettering. This is a cemetery that combines the best of Italian design with people from all over the world who came here to fight. But like the looming presence of Monte Cassino behind me, this cemetery is a reminder of the experiences and the efforts of people from all across the world who came to Italy to fight not just for its liberation, but for the liberation of Europe itself.